Be advised, Blue Rose Task Force is filled with secrets and spoilers.
Welcome back to the Blue Rose Task Force podcast, where we look deeply into Twin Peaks as a whole, one episode at a time, using the full scope of the show Twin Peaks and all its official media. We don't use the word canon, but we consider all official releases important because Lynch and Frost have approved their presence, and we welcome all input into the collective consciousness that is the Twin Peaks community and wider universe. This podcast is a watch-along podcast for those who've seen all of Twin Peaks, including the third season, which we consider as we go along. Today, we are looking at Diane, the Twin Peaks tapes of Dale Cooper, the audiobook that was released sometime between the weeks before the airing of Episode 8 and the days before Episode 9 of Twin Peaks. I'm your host, John. The Diane tapes begin with Dale Cooper in Seattle, Washington, on his way to picking up case files for Laura Palmer and Ronette Pulaski. He then heads to Spokane, Washington to pick up a car and drives to Twin Peaks, where we listen to the tapes we hear him record in Twin Peaks episodes up through the end of the Season 2 premiere, along with other new entries that lace what we know with more of Cooper's inner thoughts. As this is about 45 minutes of total material, including material we've already listened to, and that it's more of a snapshot in time rather than a wide wide spanning piece with a ton of mythology, the questions are a little more simple this time. What questions are we left with? How do these tapes help us understand Agent Cooper better? How does Agent Cooper's understanding of Twin Peaks help our own understanding of the show's world? And what do we learn about how Cooper views other characters? So these tapes were part of that package deal that they had with Pocket Books, the partnership between Lynch Frost Productions and Pocket Books. The partnership was formed near the end of the airing of Season 1, when, the culture was like wild enough about this. The Pocket Books knew that it would be a comparable sort of property to things like their Star Trek brand. It's a good match. And, the diary was the first one to be released. And I talk more about how the relationship came to be there. But as far as how these, why do they decide the diary and the tapes? Well, because they're the most iconic items within Twin Peaks. It's like you've got Laura's diary, which, the lock got popped open. And sure, it wasn't the secret one, but it was a diary that could be read. And, the other obvious prop is the dictaphone, the microcassette recorder that Cooper uses all throughout this first season. And 8 of those recordings show up right here too. So, it really is like, what else is he recording on there? I mean, it makes total sense why these two products were the first ones out of the gate. So as I said, it's a 45-minute tape, the length of 45 minutes. It's over the course of 40 tracks. 10 of those were already things that we have heard at this point. 8 of them were recordings within Season 1, and 2 of them were recorded within the Season 2 premiere. Scott Frost wrote the rest. He's the... what he ended up writing here is more about... it's connective tissue, and there is enough narrative here. Like sometimes he just writes verbatim what what some scenes would be in season 1. So it's almost like a refresher, and you're not going to get lost. Like, you're going to know kind of what timing these recordings were done in, um, just based on how much of the plot is explained as we go. Rounding out some of the actual time, Lucy's in here for one entry, which was really nice to see. It's brand new recording from Kimmy Robertson as well. And it ends with the like about 3 minutes worth of Dance of the Dream Man, the saxophone based song at the end of the Red Room Dream. And it's the whole thing is read by Kyle MacLachlan. So it's interesting, it's like we get years later we get Cheryl Lee reading the audiobook for the diary, and then we've always had this where Kyle MacLachlan read it. So, it's like we have the the two spirit, well, I mean, the one lead of the show has always kind of been a part of this product. Now, Scott Frost got the job through his brother Mark Frost, the co-creator of the show. Scott had written a number of unproduced works at this point, so he was a practiced writer who just needed something to to get started with, to break into the actual industry. And he gets this call from his brother Mark, and says, hey, the show got greenlit, come on down, and we make something out of this. And yeah, so he joined the staff. He was on the crew in season 1. He's he's fond of saying that he was one of the Icelanders at the party that the Horns threw for them at the end of episode 5. But as far as how he got the job for these tapes in particular, he told Twin Peaks Unwrapped and a few other places probably that he doesn't remember anything about this job in particular. And yeah, I mean, I could see why. It's mostly connective tissue and retelling of season 1. There are slight expansions of Cooper's thoughts, but it's the autobiography that expands this way, way, way more. So these tapes at the end, they end up kind of they feel more like a pre-writing for the book that Frost will have published, you know, uh, 8 months later or whenever it was. Wikipedia credits this audio tape as being published a few days after the season 2 premiere, but then Stephen Miller, over in his article Sound Peaks Diane, the Twin Peaks tapes of Dale Cooper, assures us that it was released around the same time as the diary in mid-September. I don't remember one way or the other personally, so I'm just kind of splitting the difference and publishing our episode here. Though I will say that Stephen's article has some spoiler-filled newspaper articles talking about what was in the tapes that was published a Friday before episode 8 ever aired. So it sure sounds like it actually released beforehand, even though it's got the spoilers of the giant in it. But, I mean, it makes sense to put it out before the season 2 premiere to, help produce the hype. It would also explain why the giant was downplayed in these tapes. It's like it's barely mentioned. He mentions to Diane, have you ever known any really tall men? And then the last the 40th entry here is the episode 8 closing remarks, where he casually mentions, it's like, I was so in need of sleep that I believe I saw a giant, basically thinking like, man, that's the, dreams are weird, that's the impression you get from listening to this. So, I could kind of see that being intended hype. It's like, what is this about a giant? We got to watch this show. Now, as far as MacLachlan's part in this, he does get nominated for a Grammy in the 1991 edition of the Grammys for Best Spoken Word Album. He didn't win, but it's nice that he got nominated. And for point of reference, that same Grammys Angelo Badalamenti won for Best Pop Instrumental Theme category for the Twin Peaks theme. So, that was the year to be for Twin Peaks to be nominated. And I'm glad I at least got 1 out of 2. Usually this would be where we would talk about a Log Lady introduction, but, again, there wasn't one because it wasn't a TV episode. And, Scott Frost doesn't remember too much about it, and Kyle MacLachlan doesn't really talk about it too much either. So, we're just going to go straight into the scene breakdown. And first, we're going to hear a few words from some of our fellow Ruminations Radio Network podcasters.
What's up, gang? This is Hoptimus. You've been listening to one of the great new podcasts from Ruminations Radio Network. If you want some more tasty sound vibes, come check out my new podcast, The Retro Futurist Culture, where we talk about alternate timelines, cyberpunk, anime, and other crazy worlds. If that does not strike your fancy, we have plenty of other great shows at ruminationsradionetwork.com.
Okay, so we're back, and these tapes, it's not the media stuff, but there are good details through this, and it's only 45 minutes, the same length as a TV episode. So I recommend you tracking it down one way or another to, just listen to it, even if it's just once, because I know I used to conflate this together with the written autobiography. The book version, and I got it confused. It's like, oh, I thought it was supposed to be audio tapes, but it's a book. And I know some other people are like, oh, I thought it was supposed to be a book, but it's some audio tapes. It's like, no, they are two completely different things. These are unrelated. So anyway, what we get out of Cooper now is we're going to look into the question: how do these tapes help us understand Agent Cooper better? Okay, from a plot point of view, I will say that this does not go into the Teresa Banks case very much. It's only mentioned once, and because this case initially doesn't look like it's connected, there's no weird continuity issues with anything that'll show up later in Fire Walk with Me. It's just name dropped essentially. Another detail, and this kind of follows how the diary got started with page 1, and this is how I got the diary and everything. This kind of follows that formula in that one of the first entries is Dale talking about how he bought his new dictaphone, and these tapes that we're hearing are the only things it has ever recorded. And, it doesn't go into anything before it. And that's just an easy, in-universe way to kind of say, we're not concerned about the past right here. We are concerned with what's happening. So these tapes catch Dale in Seattle, Washington. He's there to conduct a seminar on fiber samples procedure, which sounds absolutely joyful, doesn't it? But yeah, anyway, he gets a call from the home office to head to the local office to pick up files on what we'll find out are on Laura and Ronette. And then he has to fly through a storm on his way to Spokane, Washington, which is an about face from where he was really supposed to be going before this case interrupted things, which was back to Philadelphia. So he picks up the car in Spokane, and then he drives to Twin Peaks, and that's when we get that full monologue, exactly as he recorded it into the dictaphone in the first scene of the pilot. And honestly, these first couple of entries make me believe why he might not like Sam Stanley, because Cooper here is always talking about particulars. He's how much is it, how many things, it's like, what exactly is on his plate, what is how many exact breakfast options are there. Everything is itemized, and it's a lot like how Sam goes into the Deer Meadow office and says, I've calculated this whole entire office costs less than $27,000, or whatever he did. It's very similar to how Cooper thinks. So I kind of wonder, does Cooper not like Sam because, self-recognition fuels the dislike? Oh, just absolutely nothing intentional, but it's kind of a neat touch looking back from the future. As these tapes go on, it kind of works. And like, even though Cooper is kind of falling under the spell of Twin Peaks and like he gets a little more philosophical about it, eventually, like when they're talking about the evidence found in Jacques Renault's cabin, he, the way he kind of itemizes it there too, like even though he stops with that, because that would get probably very tedious for the listeners. He's still kind of in that mode where he'll say to Diane, Agent Cooper here, a believer in facts. And facts and figures, all, it's always in there, even as he gets kind of put under the spell of Twin Peaks. Another interesting interpretation of how Agent Cooper sees things is, after he's shot, some of the in between, or the connective tissue entries around then, he notes that Doc Hayward gives him a good prognosis of his future. Completely sidestepping the fact that Doc Hayward's like continuously pestering him to stay in the hospital. It's like, hey, why don't you talk to your psychiatrist about those wounds, or your injuries? Just all the shade that Doc Hayward gives him for not wanting to heal the way Hayward thinks he should is just completely ignored here. Like it doesn't even matter to Cooper. So, there's a certain consistency there. We also get some comedy moments, which, show off Cooper's goofier side. And there's way less of these than there are in the autobiography. So they don't really stand out so much that, they break your suspension of disbelief. Some of those, it's like Dale is literally kissing the ground after he arrives at Spokane after that storm he flew through. There's one where he's trying to record Canadian geese and they end up attacking him afterward. But that's a weird detail because he has a collection of master sound files that he has Diane pull out for him. So, listen to the sounds, the meaning of the sounds, the memory you can get from it, or whatever reason. He's an audiophile as well, just like pretty much every Blue Rose Task Force member. And then the last bit of comedy, there's one where it's after he's been shot and, he's like applying antibiotics to himself and he's going, ouch, all the time. So like, ouch, antibiotics are tough to apply. Ouch. There's Tibetan healing technique. These masters, they can, ouch, get through their pain. And I believe I am on the verge of a breakthrough. Ouch. So, it's endearing. Yeah, and it's endearing enough, like I said, not to break the suspension of disbelief, but there is one time in here that really does pretty much break it. And it's a full minute long recording that he does while undercover at One Eye Jack's. He would never be that conspicuous in the show. But, that's when we have to get a little bit more plot in it. So, we just kind of have to look the other way on this one. It's after he met Blackie, and it's right as he visually meets. After he visually confirms who he thinks Jacques Renault is. He would be way too surveilled for this, but the material is good because what's happening is Cooper is acknowledging the fine line, the fine line that he walks with, his affinity toward gambling. It's like he understands that gambling is tough and that it's like right in there with the vices. So like he doesn't like it, but he also understands that he's good at it and that there's an appeal to him. So it talks about the atonement that he does with his winnings. It breaks it down into, it's like, I do this, I do this, I do this, I contribute to this, and it ends up coming off pretty admirable. And, it's also just justifying why Cooper ends up gambling on a regular basis for the Bureau. So, I mean, maybe not admirable, but, at least to himself, he's justifying like how he makes peace with this darker aspect of his own wants and needs, quote unquote. Okay, the next main question that I have to ask about these tapes is, how does Agent Cooper's understanding of Twin Peaks help our own understanding of the show's world? And there actually is a lot of good stuff in here. I mean, the sense of nature is definitely there. I mean, as early as Seattle, Dale's talking about the clean air, and there's one episode where he's feeling the wonder of being able to see the entire Milky Way, and then there's all the supernatural overtones paired with dreams here. When talking about the Great Northern, he says, "Sounds like the kind of place where you lie down, or when where when you lie down, you won't forget to dream." And a couple of geography notes here. Lucy actually anchors the Great Northern to Meadowlark Hill, just below Whitetail Mountain. And I believe Whitetail Mountain is where Jacoby's trailer is in season 3. So the Great Northern and Jacoby are kind of on the same side of the fence here, as opposed to, the Bluetail is where Briggs has his more supernaturally aligned place. And another geography note here is Jacques' cabin is deep in the woods near Pearl Lakes. So Jacques' cabin is actually really close to where Leland used to spend his summers. And that is actually way closer to town than I would have ever given it credit for. Conflating it with what we find out in the series, I mean, that would imply that Log Lady's cabin is also near Pearl Lakes. Though, her being more White Lodge aligned, she's not too close to Pearl Lakes. More dreamy connections kind of take place with at the morgue after Harry and Albert duke it out. Cooper comments on Laura's face, which reminds me of how Ben Horn was just like studying her face there too before the altercation. And so it's like we see Cooper doing that here now, which is, I don't know. Anyway, he says, "I know good is stronger than evil, but it's difficult to see it, even in a place like Twin Peaks." So he's got this paragon status of the town. It's like a lot of people give Cooper this paragon status, like, oh, he's going to swoop in and save the day. He's going to be our knight. But like, Cooper's kind of doing that here. So like he's disassociating the physical location itself from what happens on it. And yeah, it's interesting how Cooper can see the darkness in a way and also like see the light and like not really put the two together all the time. After learning about the Bookhouse Boys, Cooper comments, "This is clearly a place that inspires dreaming about darkness and light, and who knows what dreams are real." So, yeah, I mean, again, he kind of knows what this town is about, and I guess he's just entranced by both of it, even the darkness. Another interesting comment is, events converge, the theory of concentric thinking. And Cooper goes on to talk about how it doesn't exactly, like, maybe there isn't coincidence, or maybe, like, yeah, it's a note that I thought was interesting, but like not necessarily like how to write about it. But Clay Dockery, in his article Diane, ranking my top 5 favorite Twin Peaks tapes, had this to say about it. "This is probably the deepest of the tapes as far as meaning, though it ranks a bit lower in this list for me because there is less of the personality of the Cooper I love on display. The tape is an essential part of the lore, though, and in it, Cooper spells out the theories at the heart of the show and his own demise. All of this strange and supernatural darkness that has overtaken the scenic town of Twin Peaks is interconnected. A concentric circle that is both the explanation for and the origin of all the dark and evil things that infest our world. Cooper here is not his light and breezy self, not focused on small details and a deeply felt, almost corny optimism about life. As he has been drawn further into the darkness, it has begun to overtake him. He will fight against it, but this tape has the ominous feel that the mythos is too much even for our hero. Agent Dale Cooper, we will learn, will never really escape these converging events. It will lead to the Black Lodge, the Doppelganger, and Dougie, and 25 years in the wilderness. It is all encapsulated here in this short missive to Diane, who, of course, will also be torn up in the darkness to come. Agent Cooper fighting to understand the darkness will be pulled into it. Or Agent Cooper fighting to understand the darkness will be pulled into it. So that was a really nice way to explain all the undertones around this time period of the tapes. Another interesting detail is when, I kind of wonder if Cooper has a visitation from Laura here too. It's an offhanded comment where he slept badly, and a face of a young girl, living or dead, he didn't know and not sure who it was, haunted him all night. So I kind of wonder, like, is this another one of those weird dreams where, like, it's sort of connected to things? Like, it's like in the dream he might know who it is, but then, like, when he's out of the dream, maybe not. I don't know. But it gives me serious Laura vibes here. All right, the next big question to consider through this is, what do we learn about how Cooper views other characters? And this is probably the thing that is best for the listeners. Like, this is the stuff that we would have really enjoyed at the time. Cooper says he's focused on breaking the surface of secrets. And, he basically rules out James because, as Cooper puts it, serial killers aren't interested in killing their girlfriends. They prefer the company of strangers. And as far as Harry goes, he's more Cooper is focused on Josie being dangerous than he lets on. It's like in the show, Harry says, yeah, well, I love her. And Coop says, well, it's good enough for me. But it's obviously not, because he says Harry is not just infatuated, he's fixated with Josie, and speaks to her level of danger. So he's still got his eye out for his buddy. And then we've got some interesting details about Albert here. After the Harry and Albert punching session at the morgue, Cooper says right off that Albert remains callous and insensitive. Better prepare the appropriate paperwork for action on becoming a field officer, as I suspect Albert will try to file charges against Sheriff Truman, and I intend to defend Harry to the utmost of my ability. So Albert has a history of being this adversarial with people, and being unnecessarily mean to strangers. And this whole thing makes Bob Engel's monologue about, I'm in with Gandhi and King and all that. Like, it makes all of that very, very much more out of left field than before. It's like, this could have been where we learn how Albert is to his own people, but it's not in here. It's like, we only get the Albert that we see in the show. And, it's curious, it's like, is he always just protecting his own people, and like he's going through this world that he has to fight against constantly at all levels? I don't know. It's there to be had. And Cooper also has Audrey's number here this whole time, and it kind of gives pause to all the Cooper and Audrey shippers that have been over the years. He says about her, she wants to play detective, wants to help with the investigation. So, like, he knows that she's too young for him in a lot of ways, more than just, her actual age. He says, I'm sure it's a young girl's romantic fantasy to her. She's 18, by the way, late August the 24th, or last August the 24th. I must remain alert and cautious in this area, Diane. She clearly doesn't understand the dangers involved, both physical and emotional. So he knows exactly how old she is, and there is a certain attraction noted, but he's also got her pegged as an immature innocent who's not grown up enough to be involved in any of the darkness that she's looking toward, or with him. from a facts and figures standpoint, he also mentions that late night of malts and fries and, her being in need of friendship. It was a chat that was for over an hour. So it didn't go all night. It just lasted a little over an hour. And I honestly do think that this is the in-universe proof that McLaughlin could have been working from as he read this for the tapes, that, it's like, no, he would not be involved with Audrey. And, this could have been what he helped use to convince Frost and Lynch why Cooper would have never been involved with a high schooler. Other than this, we do learn some things about Laura, but it's mostly facts. It's like we learn some more details about her murder scene near the end when Cooper lays it all out. The murder took an hour, and the scraps of paper that Hawk found, it's like they don't necessarily know their diary pages or not because they are bleached, which probably means unreadable. The blood on the towel is Leland's rather than Laura's. Well, I mean, they don't say Leland's here, but, they say it's AB negative and it must be the killer's blood. It's good information to be given, especially right before the in-show entry when he thought he saw a giant and right before we would have seen Ronette's nightmare in the show. Except it's not the show, so what we hear here instead is Dance of the Dream Man to round out the tapes. And that's all we got about this one, so we're going to go right into the sign-off. You have been listening to the Blue Rose Task Force podcast, a production of Ruminations Radio Network and TV Obsessive Radio. If you resonate with what you're hearing, please subscribe, rate, and review our show, and we would love to connect with you on Twitter at Blue Rose TF Pod, on Counter Social at Blue Rose Task Force Podcast, and Instagram and Facebook at Blue Rose Task Force. You can find me at JPB_Littlegreen on Twitter and John_the_Peaky on Instagram. Visit RuminationsRadioNetwork.com for additional great shows such as Cinephile Hissy Fit and Brevity Box. Find any number of classic 25YL Twin Peaks articles and content on many other TV shows at TVObsessive.com. And if you want to be a part of our next mailbag episode, send any comments, questions, or feedback to Blue Rose Task Force Podcast at gmail.com. We'll see you next week as we cover episode 9, the 10th overall episode of Twin Peaks. Until then, listeners, I'll see you in my dreams.
And it's a mystery.
I wish you the best of luck.
It's a way to kind of deepen and expand the universe that the show takes place in. They'll really dig it. This is a gift